The last van had been unloaded 40 minutes before the doors opened. Lena had counted every crate, confirmed every floral arrangement, and walked the perimeter of the Hartwell Grand Ballroom twice with her clipboard before the guests began arriving. This was what she did. She arrived early, stayed late, and left only when everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. In 2 years of working for Halcyon Event Coordination, she had never missed a setup deadline. The Hartwell account was her most consistent client, and the annual Gala was their most demanding event of the year. She was checking the placement of the centerpiece on table 14 when one of the venue staff handed her an envelope. "Came through the front desk," the woman said. "Your name's on it." Lena turned it over. Plain white envelope, her name typed on the front. No return address, no signature inside, just a credential badge with her photo already printed on it and the word guest printed in clean block letters beneath. Her current badge said staff. Her first instinct was that it was a mistake. Her second was that someone had gone through significant effort for a mistake to look this deliberate. She looked at the clock. Guests were already filtering in. She had 40 minutes before her coordinator duties officially ended for the evening, and the venue's own staff took over. There was no one at the front desk to ask. The woman who had delivered the envelope had already disappeared into the crowd of caterers. Lena clipped the badge to her dress. She was already wearing the fitted black outfit she always wore for Hartwell events, understated and appropriate, and told herself she would find the front coordinator before she left and sort it out then. She did not sort it out before she was swept inside with the first wave of guests. The ballroom was already full when she crossed the threshold properly, no longer as staff. The scale of it was the same as always. She had designed this layout herself, knew exactly where every table sat, every exit, every lighting rig. But something shifted when she stepped into it this way. The air was different, heavier, the perfume of dozens of guests mixed with something underneath it that she couldn't categorize, something almost electric that settled in her chest and made her want to stop moving. She kept moving. The guests around her were dressed in the kind of clothing that didn't have price tags, because the people who wore it never needed to know. Old money and new power in equal measure, and beneath the surface of all of it, something else. A current she could feel, but not name. A tension in the way people stood and moved and watched each other that had nothing to do with social performance. She had been to dozens of Hartwell events, and had never noticed it so clearly before. She was still trying to understand what was different when she heard the voice. "That badge is not yours." Lena turned. Celine Hartwell was standing 5 feet away, and she was looking at Lena the way someone looks at an insect that has wandered onto their dinner plate. She was dressed in deep emerald, her blonde hair swept up in a style that looked effortless and had taken hours, and her expression held the particular breed of contempt that required an audience to fully land. She had one. The guests nearest them had already turned. A radius of attention had formed without anyone visibly moving. "There's been a mix-up," Lena said. "I was given this at the front desk." "You were given access to the service corridors," Celine said, loud enough to carry. "You coordinate the tablecloths. I believe your work here ended an hour ago. Perhaps someone can show the help back to where it belongs." The laughter started at the edges of the crowd. Soft at first, then less suppressed. Lena kept her expression neutral. She had been talked to like this before, by clients who confused the person managing their event with furniture. She knew how to let it move through her without sticking. What she did not expect was the way the room shifted again. Not metaphorically, physically. A change in pressure, a straightening in her spine, a heightened awareness of every person in the space, every exit, every sound. The chandeliers overhead seemed slightly brighter. The music from the string quartet at the far end of the room was suddenly very clear, each note separate and distinct. She blinked. "If there has been a genuine error with the credentials," Celine continued, her voice taking on the gracious tone of someone performing magnanimity, "I am certain the staff can help you find your way out." More laughter, less suppressed this time. Lena opened her mouth. She never got to speak. The laughter stopped. It didn't fade. It stopped, completely, as if someone had cut the sound. The shift in the room was immediate and total. Lena felt it before she saw it. A stillness that moved through the crowd from the far entrance. guests stepping back and turning in a single cohesive motion without appearing to coordinate it at all. She turned with them. He was already crossing the room. She didn't know how she recognized it was him before she knew anything else about him. He was tall, dark-haired, dressed in a black suit with no ornamentation, no mark of rank or ceremony, nothing that should have distinguished him from any other man in the room. But the space around him was different. The guests didn't just part. They reorganized. They created distance the way people create distance from something that commands it, without asking. He walked directly toward her. Lena did not move. He stopped in front of her. Not in front of Caelan, not between them, but in front of her specifically, and looked at her with blue eyes that held no particular warmth and no cruelty either, just attention, the kind of attention that meant he had already known where she was before he walked through the door. He extended his hand. "Lena Voss," he said. Not a question, not an introduction. Her name, spoken with the weight of something already known. The entire ballroom was watching. Caelan had gone very still. Lena looked at his hand. She looked at his face. She read the room the same way she always read every room she walked into, measuring, cataloging, calculating. And none of what she calculated gave her a clean answer. She didn't know this man. She didn't know why he knew her name, or why something in her chest recognized the steadiness of his presence, the way a compass needle finds north without being asked. She took his hand. His grip was firm and brief. When she met his eyes again, something passed through his expression. There and gone before she could read it. A fraction of a second. A flicker of something she could not name. "She's with me," he said, to no one in particular and to everyone at once. He turned, and the crowd separated ahead of them without a word spoken. Lena walked beside him through the center of a room that had been laughing at her 30 seconds ago and was now absolutely silent. She kept her breathing steady. He did not release her arm. He offered it, a deliberate formality, his hand extended at his side, and she took it without thinking, only registering the warmth of him a moment later, the quiet solidity of it, as if the world had stopped tilting. They reached the main table, the one she had personally arranged with 8 settings and white roses, because those were the specifications she had been given, and he pulled out the chair to his right. She sat. He sat beside her. The room resumed. Slowly, carefully, conversations restarting like engines after a stall. The music came back. The waitstaff moved again. Lena set her hands in her lap and thought, clearly and precisely, "Something about this room is not what it appears to be, and I have been walking through it blind." She didn't know the man beside her. She didn't know why he had known her name, or why the room had responded to his presence the way water responds to a stone dropped into it. Immediate, radiating outward, impossible to miss. She didn't know why Caelan Hartwell was now sitting 3 tables away looking at her with an expression that could only be read as recalculation. She reached up without thinking and closed her fingers around the medallion at her throat. Small, silver-toned, older than anything else she owned. Her mother had put it around her neck when Lena was 4 years old and told her to never take it off. Lena never had. She had never questioned why those instructions had felt less like sentiment and more like something deliberate. She was thinking about it now. "You have questions," the man beside her said, quietly enough that only she could hear. "Several," she said. He reached for his glass. "Not here." She looked at him sideways. His profile was composed and unreadable. Dark hair slightly loose at the temple. Jaw clean. He was watching the room with the same quality of attention she had noticed when he crossed the floor. Comprehensive. Constant. Like someone who never fully stopped assessing. She had the distinct impression that he had already catalogued every person in the building. "You knew my name before we met," she said, equally quiet. He was still for a moment. Then, "Yes, that's not an explanation." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." She held that. She filed it, the way she filed everything she couldn't yet categorize, and returned her attention to the table. She had questions. She also had patience, and she had learned a long time ago that the answers to things worth knowing rarely arrived on a convenient schedule. Dinner was served in 3 courses. Lena tasted what was placed in front of her, because not eating would have drawn attention, but her focus was elsewhere. The man beside her, Caelan Draven, she had learned from a whispered exchange between nearby guests, said almost nothing during the first course. He ate with the same quality of attention he brought to everything else, precise and unhurried. When he did speak, it was to the guests nearest him, and they responded with a carefulness she had been cataloging for some time. It wasn't deference. She knew what deference looked like. What she was seeing was not that. The guests who spoke to Caelan chose their words slowly. They watched his reactions before completing their own sentences. They were afraid of him, not of offending him, not of losing his approval, genuinely afraid, in a way that had nothing to do with professional consequence. She was still building that picture when his shoulder touched hers, a fraction of contact, the natural result of him turning to decline the third pour from a passing server. Nothing deliberate. She registered it with a precision that had nothing to do with professional alertness, and immediately moved on to cataloging something else, because she was not the kind of person who let inconvenient data distract her from the task at hand. Then Caelan excused himself. He said it quietly and stood, and the room tracked him the way iron filings track a magnet, every face turning in his direction by instinct, and then correcting itself, looking deliberately away. Lena picked up her glass. Event coordinator. The voice came from her left. She turned. The man who had sat down in the empty chair beside her had not been there a moment ago. He was broad-shouldered, dark-haired, with the kind of physical presence designed to occupy space and communicate that fact without apology. "Marcus Vane," he said. "I handle certain matters for the Hartwell family." "What kind of matters?" He smiled. It did not reach any part of his face above the jaw, the kind that get resolved quietly. "Tonight was a surprise. Surprises create complications. I'm sure you understand that a woman in your position, a coordinator, a contractor, would prefer not to attract the kind of attention you attracted tonight." She let a beat pass. "Is that a threat?" "A professional courtesy," he said. One professional to another. Vane. One word. From 3 feet away. Caelan had returned without sound, without warning, and was standing at the edge of the table with an expression that hadn't shifted from its usual composure, but carried something beneath it, something that made the surrounding air feel denser, like the moment before a weather change. Marcus straightened. The adjustment was immediate and involuntary. He stood, and for a moment the two men regarded each other without speaking. "I was introducing myself," Marcus said. "I know what you were doing," Caelan said, completely quiet. The effect was worse than any raised voice. Marcus inclined his head. Not a concession, just acknowledgement of something he wasn't prepared to contest, and moved back toward the Hartwell section of the room. Lena watched him go. She watched Caelan sit back down beside her, reach for his glass, and resume his dinner as though nothing had occurred. "Professional courtesy," she said, keeping her voice low. "A habit of his," Caelan said, without looking at her. "Does he extend it often?" He turned his head toward her. In the warm light of the chandeliers, his eyes were a darker blue than she'd first registered, and direct, the way few people allowed themselves to be direct, without strategy or softening. "Not twice to the same person," he said. She held that for a moment, reading what it meant that he had come back specifically for her, then returned her attention to the table. The speeches ended. The room loosened into post-dinner movement. Lena felt the air change. Not Caelan's presence this time, but something cooler and more deliberate. She turned. Celine was standing at her shoulder. "A word," Celine said. It was not a request. They moved to the corridor off the main hall. The noise of the gala reduced to a low murmur behind the heavy doors. Celine turned to face her, and the social armor she wore in the ballroom had been set aside. What was underneath was not better. "Your mother's name was Diana Voss," Celine said. "Born in Keldmere, worked as a translator, died 11 years ago in what was recorded as a car accident on the northern highway outside the city. She was 31. You were 13. Lena said nothing. The corridor was very cold. "Your father, Thomas, was human. He never recovered after her death. Moved away when you were 16 and died of cardiac failure 4 years later." Celine's eyes stayed on hers. You've worked for 3 event companies in this city over the past 4 years. The Hartwell account came to you through a referral you have never questioned. The referral. Lena had never thought to question it. She filed it alongside everything else and kept her face completely still. I know the full shape of your life, Caelan continued. I have known it for considerably longer than tonight. You leave this evening, return to your regular work, and you don't pursue what curiosity is telling you to pursue right now. Lena looked at her for a long moment. How did you know my mother? Something crossed Caelan's expression. The look of someone who has run a calculation and arrived at a result they find acceptable. That question, Caelan said, is exactly the one you should not be asking. She turned and walked back through the heavy doors. Lena stood without moving. Her hand had closed around the medallion at her throat, without her deciding to reach for it. Caelan had known her mother, her birthplace, her profession, the road she had died on. She had known Thomas. She had known about the referral with a precision that made clear it had not been professional chance. Diana Voss had died when Lena was 13. Ice on the road, a curve taken too fast, nothing preventable. Lena had believed it for 11 years, because she had been given no reason not to. She was being given reasons now. She was halfway across the lobby when she became aware of someone beside her. Not behind her, not approaching. Simply there, keeping pace. As if he had been walking alongside her for some time. Are you all right? Not a question exactly. Caelan's voice carried the same quality as everything else about him. Direct, unhurried, not concerned with performing concern. I'm fine, she said. That's not what I asked. She glanced at him. He was watching her the same way he watched the room, comprehensively, without pretending he wasn't. She knew my mother, Lena said. Specifically, deliberately. I know, he said. She stopped walking. He stopped with her. How much do you know? He held her gaze for a moment. There was something in it. Not evasion, but something measured. As if he was calculating not what to say, but when. Enough that tonight was not an accident, he said. And more than I can tell you here. She studied him. He did not look away. Whatever he was carrying it squarely. And that, more than any other thing he had done tonight, was what made her decide to take the next step instead of walking out the door and away from all of it. Then you'll tell me somewhere else, she said. When you can. Something shifted in his expression. Not relief, something quieter than that, and more significant. Yes, he said. I will. The gala was winding down when she returned to the main hall, collected her bag, and signed out with the venue manager. She was nearly at the exit when a hand closed briefly around her arm. She turned. The man was younger than Caelan, lighter in coloring, carrying the same controlled attention in his expression but without the same density behind it. Caelan Draven, he said. Caelan's brother. He released her arm immediately. Leave the city. Tonight, if you can manage it. Go somewhere the Hartwell name doesn't carry. You're not going to explain why, she said. Not here. Then I'm not going anywhere. She settled her bag onto her shoulder. I appreciate the warning. She walked through the doors before he could answer. The night air was cold and direct, pulling her back into herself after hours of that charged electric weight. She stood on the pavement for a moment and breathed. Caelan had known her mother. She had known about Thomas. She had arranged the referral. 11 years, and Lena had carried the story she was handed without once looking beneath it. By the time she reached the end of the block, the decision was already complete. She would go through every piece of paper that had passed through the Hartwell account. She had 2 years of their administrative records at her legitimate disposal. She was going to use them. She started with the oldest files. The Hartwell account filled 2 archive boxes in the Halcyon storage room. She signed them out through the office log the same way she always did, leaving a clean trail of what she had taken and when, because she had never needed secrecy to do her job until now. She also had the digitized backlog from the previous coordinator, scans going back 7 years. Lena worked through them at her kitchen table over 2 days, building a grid on a legal pad as she went. Most of it was exactly what it appeared to be. Event invoices, catering deposits, venue contracts with the usual addendums. She found the inconsistency on the 3rd day. It was buried in a scanned document from a smaller event, a private dinner 12 years ago, at a venue that had since closed. The original venue contract, misfiled in a box labeled with a different year, did not match the scanned version in the digital archive. The scanned version had a different signatory, a different date on the amendment clause. Small changes. Precisely the kind that someone would make if they needed the record to reflect a particular version of events. The original contract put the Hartwell family in that building on the last Thursday of the month. The amended version moved the date back by 4 days. Lena's mother had died on the last Thursday of that month. She sat with that for a long time. Then she made a call. Caelan answered on the second ring. "I found something," she said. "I need to show you in person." "I'll send a car," he said. "I'll drive myself. Give me an address." The address he gave her was a private residence on the edge of the city, behind a gate that opened before she reached it. She parked, and was met at the door by Owen, who directed her inside without surprise. Caelan was in a room that functioned as a working office. Desk, monitors, stacked documents. He was not alone. A second man stood near the window, whose name she was not given, and who left without being asked to when Caelan looked at him. Before she could set the documents on the desk, Caelan crossed the room to her. Not quickly. He didn't do anything quickly. But he came directly, and stopped close enough that she registered the warmth of him before he spoke. "You look like you haven't slept," he said. "I haven't. But that isn't why I called." She put the 2 documents on the desk side by side. "This is..." She walked him through it. The misfiled original, the discrepancy in dates, what that discrepancy meant in relation to her mother's death. She laid it out methodically, without the emotional register she was deliberately keeping below the surface. Caelan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat back. He looked at both documents carefully, and then he looked at her. "This confirms what my team has been building toward for the past 4 months, he said. "We suspected the documentation around your mother's death had been altered. We didn't have a physical original. You were already investigating her death," Lena said. "We were investigating Celine. Your mother became relevant when we started finding gaps in the Hartwell records that traced back to that period." He paused. "There's something else I need to tell you. Something that will be difficult to hear, and I'd ask you to let me finish before you respond." She sat down across from him. "Go ahead. You carry a suppressed shifter gene," he said. "It was blocked at birth, deliberately, by someone who knew what they were doing. Without the suppression, you would have presented as a shifter by your early teens. The gene is dormant, but intact." He held her gaze. "Your mother was a shifter. Your father was human. You inherited the gene from her, and someone made a choice to hide that from you before you were old enough to understand what you were." Lena looked at him. She processed it the way she processed everything that didn't fit into a known category. She set it next to the things she already knew and looked for the shape they made together. The way the ballroom had felt when she walked in. The clarity of the music, the heightened edge of everything. Celine's expression when she looked at her. Not just contempt, but something that had recognized something. "The ballroom," she said. "At the Gala. That's why it felt the way it did. Proximity to other shifters can activate latent responses, even in someone suppressed," he said. "What you experienced was real. Was that why you knew my name?" she said. "Before we ever met." He was quiet for a moment. Not evasive, but precise in the way of someone choosing words that will be accurate rather than convenient. "Partly," he said. "I had known about you through the investigation. But what I recognized when I walked into that room..." He stopped, started again. "That was something else." She held that. Something else. Yes. She sat with it. It was information. It was significant information, and she understood that the full weight of it would arrive later, when she had space to let it. But right now she was still in the part of the process where she was cataloging. "Who suppressed it?" she said. "We don't know yet. Does Celine know what I am?" "Yes," he said. "She's known for some time. She put you in proximity to her records on purpose, Lena. She had you processing her own documentation." "Why? We're still working out why." He looked at her steadily. "There's something else." "Of course there is," she said. Something moved through his expression. Not quite amusement, but something in its direction, brief and real. Owen told you to leave the city the night of the gala. If I was investigating Caelan, why would he say that? She had wondered. There's an informant, she said. Inside your circle. He was still for a moment. How did you? It was the only explanation that made sense. She met his eyes. Owen's instruction was designed to make me look like I'd been warned away. If the informant reported that I'd complied, it bought time. You used me as a signal. Owen made a judgment call, he said. I would have done it differently. How would you have done it? I would have told you. She looked at him for a long moment, reading the honesty of it, the steadiness of it, the fact that he said it without softening it into strategy. Then she nodded once and returned her attention to the documents on the desk. She did not get further. Owen appeared in the doorway. Marcus filed a formal challenge, he said. He's claiming that her presence at the gala was a deliberate infiltration. He's calling for her removal from any protected status and requesting a formal review of your decision to seat her at the main table. What does a formal challenge mean in practical terms? Lena said. It means he's made a public record, Caelan said. He stood. Every alpha in this region will know about this challenge by tonight. If I don't respond to it, the silence reads as acknowledgement. And if you do respond? He picked up the original venue contract from the desk. Then I respond. What followed happened through channels she could observe, but not fully interpret. Caelan made 2 calls. Owen left and returned. A third person arrived, conferred briefly in the hallway, and left again. The response, when it came, was formal and absolute. Caelan placed her under his direct protection, on record, with his name attached to it. He told her afterward, without ceremony. It's a declaration. It means anyone who moves against you moves against me directly. Marcus's challenge becomes irrelevant. You can't challenge a placement that's been formally recognized at this level. What level is this level? She said. The highest one, he said. She understood what that meant. She also understood what a declaration like that cost in political capital. Your motivation, she said. I want to understand it. The investigation needs you credible and accessible, he said. If Marcus discredits you, the documents you found lose their standing. That's the practical reason. And the other reason? He looked at her for a moment. The same quality of attention he had brought to the gala, comprehensive and direct. And the room was very quiet. I knew what that room was doing to you tonight, he said finally. When Caelan spoke to you the way she did, I knew what you were standing in the middle of without any of the context that would have told you how to navigate it. He paused. That wasn't something I was prepared to leave uncorrected. She held that. It was more than strategy. She recognized it for what it was, and recognized too that he had told her honestly, and that honesty in this context was rarer than she had expected. Thank you, she said. It came out more quietly than she intended. He nodded once. Then, after a beat, there's a room on the 2nd floor. You should sleep. I have more files, too. They'll be there in the morning. She looked at him. He looked back, patient, absolute. All right, she said. The fracture in pack politics came fast. By the following day, Owen had relayed that 3 alpha families had aligned with Caelan's position, and 2 others had gone formally neutral. The declaration had been received as a provocation. Over the following days, the house shifted around her. Doors that had been left open were kept closed. Names that had been said casually were said less often. People arrived in pairs, spoke in low voices, and left without ever using the front entrance twice in a row. Caelan was present and absent at the same time. He stayed close enough that she never felt unprotected, but there were stretches when she only saw him in brief intervals. A few minutes in the hallway, a quiet exchange at the edge of a room being used for calls and decisions. Then, late on the 3rd evening, she found him in the office after most of the house had gone quiet, standing at the window with a glass of water, not looking at anything in particular. She set her legal pad on the desk. You don't sleep. I do, he said, rarely in useful windows. He looked at her. How much have you put together? Enough to know that what Caelan was doing goes further back than my mother. Falsified lineage records, fabricated alliances. She sat. Someone helped her maintain it over time. Someone with consistent access to the documentation. I found a name, B. Wren, listed as a consultant across 3 separate Hartwell events over a span of years. No company. No formal contract. Paid outside the standard billing process. He was watching her the way he always watched her. That comprehensive, unhurried attention that she had stopped finding unnerving and started finding something else entirely, something she didn't have a precise word for yet. "You're going to find him," Caelan said. "Yes, without telling me. I haven't decided yet," she said honestly. "The informant is still a concern." "Renner," he said. She looked up. "We identified him this afternoon. Outer tier of my security staff, placed 2 years ago. Communications routed to a Hartwell secondary channel. He's been detained. So the channel is clean, as of 6 hours ago." She considered that. "Then I'll tell you what I find when I find it." Something shifted in his expression. Small, controlled, but visible to her now, in the way that all his small movements had become visible to her over the past several days. The way you learn the grammar of a language not through study, but through prolonged and attentive proximity. "When did you start trusting me?" he asked. It was a genuine question. "Somewhere around the 2nd day," she said. "When I realized you'd done exactly what you said you would do in every instance where you'd said you would do something." It accumulated. She looked at him. "Is that useful information?" "Yes," he said. "It is." She picked up her legal pad. He picked up his glass. For a while they worked in the same room without speaking, and the quiet between them was different from the quiet of earlier in the week. Less careful, less provisional, the quiet of 2 people who had stopped needing to map every silence for threat. She was going to need more paper. The name B. Wren led her to a small conference facility 40 minutes outside the city, to a building manager who kept physical records and remembered a single anomaly in 15 years of Hartwell bookings. A handwritten phone number, different ink, clipped to the back of a file that was otherwise sparse. The number was disconnected. But area codes had geography. Through her logistics network, she traced it to a reclusive elderly man who had lived quietly in a district outside the city for over a decade. No documented employer. No active social presence. Bram. She arranged the logistics the way she arranged everything, through a sequence of individually unremarkable steps. A borrowed vehicle. A route that passed through 2 other stops on legitimate professional business. She found him at the 2nd address. Contained the way people become when they have spent a long time making themselves small in order to stay safe. He opened the door before she knocked. He looked at her face, then at the medallion at her throat. "You're Diana's daughter," he said. "Yes," she said. He stepped back from the door. The interior of the house was spare and organized. Shelves of physical documents, maps with handwritten annotations. He sat across from her at a narrow table. "Your mother found it in the Hartwell administrative records," he said. "Not what you found. Further back. Decades of falsified lineage documentation. A systematic reconstruction of bloodlines across shifter families in this region. They had been replacing real lineage records with versions that supported Hartwell claims to territorial authority. Alliances built on fabricated heritage. Families bound together on the basis of manufactured history." Lena was very still. "She was a translator," he continued. "She had access to original documents the Hartwell family used her to process. They trusted her discretion because they believed she didn't understand the significance of what she was reading." He paused. "They were wrong. She understood completely. And she began making copies." "Where are the copies?" Lena said. He looked at the medallion. "She gave them to you," he said, "before you were old enough to understand what they were. The documentation is encoded in the structure of that piece. It was made specifically for that purpose. A Hartwell wouldn't recognize it for what it is. Neither would most people, but with the right equipment, everything she gathered is still in there." Lena's hand moved to the medallion before she could stop it. She had worn it for 20 years, every day, through every school year, and job and move and quiet grief and ordinary mourning. Her mother had clasped it around her neck at 4 years old and told her never to take it off. Her mother had known, when Lena was 4 years old, that something might happen to her. She sat with that for a moment and let it arrive fully for the first time since this had all begun, not as information, as the thing it actually was, A woman who had understood the risk clearly enough to plan for the possibility of not surviving it, and had made the only move left to her, trusting 20 years and the shape of her daughter's life to carry the truth forward. Then she set it aside. There was still work to do. She was killed because of what she collected, Lena said. Yes, Bram said. The Hartwells discovered she had been copying the records. I had enough warning to disappear before they came for me. He met her eyes. I've been waiting for someone to come. I didn't know if it would be you or someone who worked for Celine. You still don't know for certain, Lena said. He looked at her for a long moment. No, but if you worked for Celine, you would have taken the medallion years ago. She's been trying to locate it since Diana died. He folded his hands on the table. You didn't know it had anything in it. I didn't, Lena confirmed. The decoding process took the better part of the following day, working with Bram's equipment and his quiet guidance on the technical steps. When it was done, she spent the next several days verifying what her mother had built, cross-checking dates, matching handwriting, rebuilding the chain of custody in her own notes. What emerged was a compressed archive, scanned documents, annotated copies, cross-reference tables, her mother's handwriting in the margins of pages she had copied while pretending to translate them. Diana Voss had been meticulous. The documentation was complete. She sent Owen a single message on the clean channel. She had located a witness and was arranging his safe transport. Owen responded within the hour, understood. And then, 12 minutes later, a second message. We have the informant. Renner, detained pending formal proceedings. Marcus discovered that Bram had been located. He did not need the Draven side's compromised channel for everything. The Hartwells had other methods, quiet eyes in quiet places, people who reported unfamiliar cars. He moved to intercept. He was 2 hours behind and reached the address to find it empty. She had moved Bram the previous evening to a second location, arranged through her logistics contact, a property with no connection to either the Draven name or the Hartwell account. By the time Marcus was standing in an empty house, Lena was on the road back into the city. She called Caelan from the road. I have the evidence, she said when he answered. All of it. I'll explain when I get there. A pause. I'll have Owen meet you at the gate. She drove. Outside the windows, the city moved through its ordinary evening, lights appearing in windows, traffic thinning at intersections, the unremarkable rhythm of a world that didn't know what was running beneath it. In the seat beside her, Bram was quiet, carrying the look of someone who has been holding a specific weight for so long that setting it down feels less like relief and more like disorientation. Lena kept both hands on the wheel. When the gate opened ahead of her, and Owen stepped out to meet the car, she saw Caelan behind him on the steps of the house. He was still, in the way he was always still, but there was something different in it tonight, a quality of attention that was less comprehensive and more particular, directed entirely at her. She got out of the car. He crossed the distance between them without appearing to hurry. You're all right, he said. I told you I would be. You did. He stopped in front of her. There was something in his expression that he wasn't trying to contain the way he usually contained things. Not fully. I know. She looked at him for a moment. Were you worried? He held her gaze. Yes, he said. Simply. She had been cataloging him for days. His stillness, his precision, the particular economy of everything he did. She had cataloged the way he had come to her at the gala, and the way he had come back for her at dinner, and the way he had said, I would have told you, with a directness that had cost him something. She had cataloged the late evening in the office, the quiet, the way the silence between them had changed. She had been careful about what she did with that catalog. She was less careful now. Come inside, she said. I have everything. Let me show you. He fell into step beside her, close enough that their arms almost touched. Owen took Bram ahead. The house was quiet around them. And for a moment, just a moment, at the edge of the light spilling from the open door, she let herself acknowledge what she had been filing under information and what it actually was. She intended to face it clearly. Just not quite yet. The tribunal convened 3 days later. Representatives from 12 families filled the room. Lena stood at the center of them and spent 40 minutes laying out what her mother had spent years gathering. The falsified lineage records across 3 decades, the contract that placed the Hartwells at the location on the night of Diana's death, Bram's testimony as a direct witness, and the full decoded archive from the medallion. She spoke without notes. She had memorized it. She had built the case the way she built every event she had ever coordinated. From the ground up, nothing left to chance. When she finished, Marcus moved. Not for a door. Directly toward her, reaching for the folder in her hands with the particular intent of someone who has decided that the content of that folder cannot be allowed to stand. He did not reach it. Owen stepped in front of him, took hold of his arm, and held. The room went very still. Caelan, from the head of the arrangement, said nothing. He simply looked at Marcus. The effect was the same as it had always been in every room Lena had ever watched him occupy. Total, immediate, irresistible. Marcus stopped. The panel's representative spoke the sentence 3 minutes later. Protocol violation in an active formal proceeding, aggravated by the documented attempt to suppress evidence. Loss of standing. Immediate detention pending full review. Marcus was removed from the room. Celine heard her own sentence without moving. Systematic fraud across territorial records spanning 31 years. Complicity in the arranged death of Diana Voss. Suppression of shifter lineage by deliberate falsification. The sentence was the most severe available under shifter law. Permanent suppression of her shifted nature and exile without possibility of reinstatement. Not death, but a removal from everything she had built herself into being. She looked at Lena once, near the end. The expression was not what Lena had expected. Not the contempt of the ballroom, not the calculation of the corridor. It was something older and harder. And underneath it, if Lena read it right, was the look of someone who had always known this was how it would end and had kept moving anyway. Then she was escorted out. The room began to empty. Lena stood where she was. She was holding the folder loosely in both hands, and she was aware of the moment in the way she had been aware of very few moments in her life. Not cataloging, not calculating, just present. Then it moved through her, the suppression, the block placed at her birth, and maintained for 24 years, came apart under the accumulated pressure of the past 2 weeks. Not gradually, all at once, the way a structure gives when the stress finally exceeds its tolerance. She did not shift. What happened was not a transformation. It was more fundamental, a wave of sensation that moved from her sternum outward, every nerve recalibrating. The room around her suddenly present in a way no room had ever been present before. Sound layered, textures sharpened. The air itself became information. The representatives still in the room registered it. She watched them register it, bodies turning by instinct toward something they recognized without being able to name. Her knees did not go out, but they thought about it. Caelan was beside her before she had finished processing that he had moved. His hand closed around her arm, steady, warm, certain, and she became aware of him the way she had become aware of everything else, only more so. The solidity of his grip, the particular quality of presence that had reorganized every room she had ever watched him enter. "I have you," he said, low, close, only for her. She breathed. The room settled. The recalibration finished. And what was left was not the absence of something, but the presence of it. Herself, complete, everything that had been locked away restored, and quiet and hers. She looked up at him. He was already looking at her. "That's what it was supposed to feel like," she said. "Yes," he said. "That's exactly what it was supposed to feel like." He didn't release her arm. She didn't step back. The room continued its quiet emptying around them. Owen moving efficiently at the door. Bram receiving the formal acknowledgement of his witness status from the panel representative. A brief declaration, recorded and witnessed. Bram looked visibly lighter afterward. Lena thought about her mother at a table much like this one, copying documents in the margins of pages she was supposed to be translating, hiding the evidence inside a piece of metal she would clasp around her daughter's neck and never explain. Diana had understood the risk. She had loved this world anyway, had loved someone in it, had fought for the truth of it. had trusted that the evidence would find its way to the right hands 20 years later. It had. Caelan's hand was still at her arm. She became aware of it again, differently from before, not as steadying, not as support, but as something chosen, something that had been chosen from the moment he crossed a ballroom floor toward a woman he knew by name but had never met, and had not uncrossed since. She turned to face him properly. "Lena," he said. "I know," she said. He looked at her for a long moment, that comprehensive, unwavering attention that she had catalogued, and finally stopped pretending to be indifferent to. Something in his expression opened, just slightly, in a way she had only seen once before, that fraction of a second at the gala, there and gone before she could read it. She could read it now. "There is a great deal still ahead," he said. "I know that too," she said. "I intend to face it clearly." He looked at her the way someone looks at a fact they have been waiting to say out loud for some time. "Not alone," he said. "No," she said. "Not an agreement. A decision. Not alone." His hand moved from her arm to her hand, briefly, his fingers closing over hers. A grip as firm and real as the first one. The one she had taken on a ballroom floor while a room full of people watched, and the world realigned around the choice of it. She held it for a moment. Then Owen called from the doorway, and there was work still to do, and she released his hand and walked toward the door with the sure, deliberate step of someone who knows exactly where they are and exactly where they are going. She did not look back. She didn't need to. She knew he was there.